Hey everyone, welcome to the huddle. I hope everyone had a good Halloween and a good election day if you had elections in your area. While everyone's getting settled in, please say hi in the chat and let us know where you're from and your name. And in the meantime, Wendy will go over a little housekeeping items.
Housekeeping will be short because I think we all know what we're doing by now, but just as a reminder, the presentation will be 20 minutes long, followed by 20 minutes of Q&A, and everything. We just ask you to remain muted for the remainder of the presentation, and unless you have a question, we'll take those at the end, but feel free to write a question in the chat at any time. The recording will be on MPF or Maddie's platform, so feel free to rewatch or share or watch anything that you have missed so far. And I believe that's it. Very, very short.
And if you had a good Halloween costume that you want to share, put that in the chat too. And Wendy, I'm gonna call on you one more time. What did your daughter dress up as for Halloween?
She was a pug to match my pug. So
it's perfect. You had a matching set. Well, awesome. Thanks, everyone. While we're getting settled in, let me go ahead and introduce our speakers today. So today we're talking about embracing a welcoming culture. And we are joined by Mandy Evans of Better Together Animal Alliance and Andrew Dorman of Cat Town. Mandy is the Executive Director of Better Together Animal Alliance and the Home to Home Network. Mandy came to animal welfare over 8 years ago as the first executive director for the organization after leaving a career as a professional corporate event planner. She has worked to transcend a fear-based negative environment in which animals were housed instead of adopted and where the local population expressed what they perceived was a lack of support. Mandy's love for animal welfare was solidified after her dog Molly became paralyzed due to a malformed spine. Instead of euthanizing her, Mandy dedicated herself to providing Molly with the best life possible. She developed a website for owners of special needs dogs called My Special Needs Dog and a nonprofit, Molly Inspires, which took Mandy and Molly into elementary schools across the nation, teaching kids about empathy, kindness, and to not be scared of people who are different than you. So welcome, Mandy. That's awesome. All of these things already talking about a welcoming culture and being very inclusive. So can't wait to hear what you say today. And then Andrew is the executive director of Cat Town in Oakland. Andrew's career started when he became a volunteer at Oakland Animal Services in January 2014, where he helped create their Working Cat program. Since 2016, the program has placed more than 200 feral cats. Over the years, Andrew has deepened his involvement in the animal welfare community by joining the board of directors for the Friends of Oakland Animal Services, becoming an IAABC accredited as as a shelter behavior affiliate. Andrew was a member of Cat Town's leadership team for 2 years prior to becoming executive director in January 2020 and has served as a volunteer for the organization before that. So Andrew lives with Sinatra, Coraline, and Pepper, his kitties, along with his partner Katrina in Oakland, where they have fostered more than 50 cats and kittens. And I'm sure the next time we talk to Andrew, that number will be even larger. So again, already seeing so much great work and so much inclusivity done by our speakers before they even talk. So let's go ahead and I'll turn it over to Andrew if you want to unmute Andrew and tell us about what you're going to share about creating a welcoming culture today.
Sure. Thanks, Amber. Actually, that's out of date on our website. We're already up to 70 cats and kittens. We just hit number 70 with a pair of ringworm kittens we just finished fostering. So
that's awesome. We'll have to update it on our end.
So thank you, So just briefly, Cat Town obviously is a cat rescue organization founded in 2011 to focus on what we call hard to place cats. So we're blessed with a rich network of shelters and rescue organizations in the San Francisco Bay Area. So we've really been able to focus narrowly on cats with the highest need for intervention. So senior cats, cats with behavior challenges, medical, et cetera, et cetera. And in 2014, we opened our brick and mortar adoption center, which is also a cat cafe, the first cat cafe in the United States, which is, I guess, sort of what we're best known for. I'm really excited to speak with you about this subject because it's really been a core part of our philosophy at Cat Town to create an environment that's not just great for cats, but is also really welcoming for the community. We want people to enjoy their time with our organization. So I guess I should be sharing my screen. I'm already falling down on the job. There we go. So, many people may have a negative perception of animal shelters. Either they may avoid going there, right? They may find that the shelter is a depressing place, or they get there and they see so many animals in kennels and cages that they sort of reach decision paralysis and are unable to choose a pet to adopt just because there's so many to choose from. Where they're clinging to sort of outdated views of what an animal shelter is like. So when we designed our adoption center in Oakland, we very intentionally tried to make it a space that's not just great for cats, but is a place that people want to come and spend time. So here's just one shot of what our adoption center looks like. So people can come and, of course, adopt, which is our main purpose. But we're a cat cafe, so they can also spend, if they're not looking to adopt at this time, they can come and spend $10 and spend an hour with the cats. And this has been a really tremendous way for us to reach the community and reach a really diverse audience of pet lovers. People come for a whole host of different reasons, sometimes just for fun, sometimes to get a little kitty therapy. They may come to teach their children about pets. They may come because they recently lost an animal and they're going through a grieving process. Or, like I said, a whole host of different reasons. So it's really something that sort of surprised me about our work is that this sort of, in a way, it's a service to the community, letting people come in and have this experience with animals in this environment. And so one of the things we did last year was we wanted to make sure that this service was available to anyone without cost being a barrier. So we implemented a new program where we waive our cat zone entry fees for local community groups and nonprofits, so that anyone who wants to experience the kind of quirky love of a cat has access to Cat Town. And it's open to all community groups, but our emphasis is really to reach other organizations that serve disadvantaged communities. And it's been just really such a rewarding experience and working with these other organizations. There's a little thank you note here on the right from some folks who visited recently from a local organization that serves adults with disabilities. And it's just really been tremendous to see the benefit that love of a pet brings to people, even if they're not in a position to adopt. So I do want to talk about adoptions. That's going to be the core of what I'm talking about today. I think that that's our core mission, is to find homes for cats. So we strive to have a very open and inclusive adoption process. And for us, that means first and foremost operating from a place of trust. Our adoption process is all about matchmaking and conversations. We don't do any home inspections. We don't do any reference checks. There's been a lot of talk on some of the other huddles about adoption applications and making those as brief and easy and painless as possible, which I fully support. At Cat Town, we've gone a little farther than that. We actually have no applications. So our adoption process starts and ends as a conversation. So people reach us either through by the phone, by email, or in person at our adoption center. And from start to finish, the whole adoption process is a conversation. Conversation, we use a lot of open-ended questions. We want to understand what a potential adopter is looking for, what experience they're hoping to have with their pets. what their home environment is like, what their needs are, what their experience level is, et cetera. And then our staff or volunteers who do adoption counseling work with them to find the right match. So it's a matchmaking process. And we pair that up with really robust post-adoption support. So people may be fearful about placing animals in a home if you've never been there, you haven't done the home inspection, et cetera. And I think it's one of the ways we mitigate that risk of something going awry is by really having a robust post-adoption support program. And so we check in on every adopter within a week or two of their new cat going home. This is a routine email, very casual and friendly. How are things going? Kind of extending an offer of advice or support if they're having any problems. And then for our more complicated animals that have some more serious behavior or medical concerns, we actually proactively assign what we call a case manager volunteer, which sounds super fancy, but it's just a point of contact for adopters to get expert advice as they're integrating their new cat into their home life. And then also related to all of this is about returned adoptions. Never our objective, but returns happen. We don't view them as failures. We expect returns. It's a normal part of the adoption process for us. And they happen. We don't consider it a mark against the cat. We don't consider it a mark against the adopter. It just sometimes isn't the right fit. So we always accept our kitties back into our program. And even when there's a return, it still benefits us. It benefits the cat. We learn something about what the cat is like in a home environment, what their needs are. We can do a better job of matchmaking the next time around. And of course, whatever time they spent in a home before they were returned was time they didn't spend in a shelter cage. So that's also a win. So we've always had this approach to adoption ever since our founding. But we've been looking at all of these things pretty carefully over the last year or so, like many organizations. So last year we decided we really needed to formalize and document our values around our adoption. So we adapted this statement of values from adoptions. It came borrowed heavily from an organization called CARE, which many of you have heard of. Their link is down there if you haven't checked them out. So we incorporated this sort of statement about our approach to adoption into our training for all of our adoption counselors to really make sure that everybody's on the same page and understanding what our values are. And again, just emphasizing that we're coming from a place of trust. We assume that people who are coming to adopt from us have good intentions. They're going to provide a good home. And our role is to matchmake and help them find the pet that's going to be the best fit for their situation. I want to talk a little bit about adoption fees. I hope it's not a third rail a little bit, so I'm just going to share with you how we look at adoption fees at Cat Town. I believe pretty strongly that adoption fees should be as low as possible. We don't want cost to be a barrier for people having a pet. If we crank our adoption fees up too much, people are going to go elsewhere. Only 25–30% of animals are adopted from shelters and rescue organizations anyway. So we're in the San Francisco Bay Area, so these fees are based on what our region is like. Obviously, these vary pretty dramatically across the country. So some of you may be looking at that and thinking that's very high, but this is sort of a typical adoption fee for a cat in the San Francisco area. So we decided on an approach of using sort of a sliding scale. There are about 1 million different ways you could do this, but because we, as the executive director, one of my roles is to raise money for the organization. So that is intention and a little bit with trying to keep our fees as low as possible. So we let our adopters choose their own fee. We set 3 levels. So our standard fee is $100, and for the folks who can afford it, they can include an additional donation in there, what we call complete care. And then we offer a reduced adoption fee for folks with lower fixed income. And people self-select this. We basically hand them the form and ask them to choose the fee that's most appropriate for their situation. We don't, of course, don't ask for any documentation or proof of need or anything like that. We're only talking about a few dollars. So, and one thing that's been really interesting in having this fee structure for the last year and a half or so is we get a lot more people choosing the $200 fee than the $75 fee. So that's been beneficial for our organization, but also for the folks who need it, they can save a little money for their setup to because they've got to go invest in supplies and things as well for their new pet. So does it work? Well, we think it does. I think there's value in having this inclusive approach just inherently. But for us, the main metric that we look at to see if we're being successful is not just how we're performing as an organization, but how we're benefiting the broader community and the pets in our community. And so we look at our primary partner is our Oakland's municipal shelter, Oakland Animal Services. So we look at how they're doing and saying, are we doing a good job of supporting them? And I think that our approach to adoptions and targeting the cats that we target has been very successful. And we've helped Oakland's municipal shelter increase their live release rate up to 93% last year. So we think it definitely pays dividends in our life-saving work. That's what I've got for you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So you're getting a lot of love in the chat. And one of the things I have to agree with for sure is that there's so many great places in the Bay Area, but Cat Town is one of my all-time favorite places in Oakland. And please don't tell my partner that, because he works in Oakland and his work is very important to our relationship as well. But I got to pick Cat Town every time.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So thank you so much for sharing. We'll go ahead and get to the questions in the chat in a little bit. But first, I'd like to go ahead and Mandy, let you share your screen and tell us a little bit about Better Together Animal Alliance and your welcoming environment.
Hello, everybody. I am assuming you can hear me, right, Amber? Yeah, okay, good. I took away the little picture so I couldn't get distracted. I am Mandy Evans, Executive Director of Better Together Animal Alliance. I just want to give a call out to Andrew and Cat Town. You guys are doing amazing work. That's really great. And I love that you said that you operate off of a foundation of trusting people. And then I think that is also demonstrated in the fact that people are selecting a higher rate to pay for their cats. Because so many times we look at it as though if you offer a lower price, people will always select it. And you are proving that that is not necessarily the case. And it's good to trust people. Better Together, I've been with them for now over, it's almost 11 years. We made the switch to how we operate to be a more open, community-focused organization about 6 years ago. And what I'm going to do with you is I'm hoping it's a little less about what we do as an organization and more kind of challenging the way that we think about our community. So as Better Together, we are a private shelter with municipal contracts. So we are the main intake facility for the 3 northern counties in Idaho. So what we found was all of a sudden, we took a moment and said, why are people not coming to us when they need help? Like we're the group that's supposed to be serving the community and we're actually really nice. Why aren't people coming to us when they need assistance? And we evaluated our whole organization. And so what we decided was when people come in and they look like this, we immediately are triggered to think, oh, bad person. How are we going to handle these people? Should we call the police? Do we need to be really firm because they look angry? And we decided that we should change the way that we're viewing this and say, are these people coming in with the preconceived idea that they're going to be shamed or treated differently? And should we be evaluating that and looking at them as good community members who might just need a little help? So understanding the human condition, that is kind of what we're talking about. So anger is a result of fear and sadness. One of the things we like to do is we like to challenge ourselves. So when someone comes into the intake area and maybe they look like that and they're kind of angry, is we ask ourselves, okay, if anger is actually a result of fear or sadness, where is this person coming from? Are they scared that we might keep their pet? Are they scared there might be fees involved? And once we can kind of identify through questions and being really supportive, we can turn this conversation into a positive. So the hard part about about anger is that anger is the most accepted emotion in our community or in our environment. It's not fear or sadness because those are frowned upon. Those are viewed as weakness. So people are naturally going to show their anger over the other two emotions because it's just the way we've all been conditioned. So then there's shame. And with shame, we all have it, right? Like it's either something that's already, it's obviously already inside of us, but it can be induced through the silliest things. And I always tell this story about me going to the dentist. I'm in the car going to the dentist, and in my head, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, are they going to tell me that I didn't do a good job, flossing? What are they going to find about my teeth that I don't know about? And I'm literally like shaming myself the whole way to the dentist with this preparation that they're going to find that I've done something wrong. Now, every time I go, they never find anything wrong. But if they were to say something negative or even the slightest comment, I'm probably going to take that more emotionally than I would otherwise because I've already built myself up with shame. So when we look at people who are coming in and they might have an attitude or they might be a little bit more bristly, we have to really be careful on how we're approaching our community members so that we are not accidentally triggering their shame. So how we do that is by asking a lot of questions on our adoption applications, by negatively phrasing questions on applications and surrender forms, not being respectful to those who fall short of our expectations, such as Andrew said with adoption returns, not honoring positive intentions. And this is the foundation of a lot of the community work we do, is really meeting people where they're at. So if they come and the dog's nails are really long, we're not going to shame them for that. We're going to provide them with the service because they're coming to us with the positive intention of needing assistance with their dog. And then having unrealistic expectations. And I feel like this has kind of been our thing for a long time in animal welfare, is that we've really put these high expectations on people to care for their pets exactly the way we will. And we need to be able to say that there's a lot of factors in the way that people care for their pets. And then not smiling or making eye contact. Easy peasy, right? Like just smiling, making eye contact, and treating the person in front of you as an equal to you will go a long, long way. So the other big one, I don't think, I'm like, this, maybe people do this still, but keeping people's pets if they can't pay the reclaim fees or for medical procedures. We used to do this. I will own it. We would have somebody would come in and say that their dog needed a surgery or their cat needed to have a leg amputated, and we would tell them we would be able to bring their cat in and help them, but that we had to keep their pet and find it a good home. So we have to focus. The basic reason that we are in this work is everybody in the past might have said, like, we're here for animals. And as we have grown and matured, we've realized that really the reason we're doing this work is because of the bond that we feel with animals. And it's the same thing that our community members are feeling as well. So in order to do that, we need to support people and pets equally. We need to keep them out of shelters. We need to be leaning into our community. One of the things that we found that we were doing, again, unintentionally, is that somehow when you decided to come work for us, you became better than everyone else. You became more knowledgeable about animal welfare. You became the expert on animal welfare. You became a level above the community. And here we say now, no. Like, we're the community and they are us. We're no different. We might have access to resources they don't have, but we start everything at a basis of equality, that we are them and they are us. And when we do that, we're able to really touch the people who need help that we may have accidentally excluded in the past. One of the aspects that I just learned about was that dogs have really transformed to be very connected to people, where cats, obviously we love our cats, but they have proven that they don't rely 100% on their humans, where dogs do. And so when we get a dog into our shelter, we have to say, the best pairing is going to be with the owner that had this pet to begin with. Like if we're going to do behavior modification, if we're going to do medical care, that connection with that person is really, really important. Same with cats. I'm not trying to reduce the connection between a person and a cat, but there's a study, I don't know if it's ongoing in the Bahamas, that demonstrates the reliance that these dogs have on people now. All right, the I gotcha. If you have an I gotcha environment in your shelter, it's supporting a culture of distrust and negativity. So we used to do this. We would be like, oh, really? And did you find that animal on the side of the road? And how do you know its name? And, it was like constantly trying to ask questions to figure out if somebody was lying to us, and so we could get them. And by doing that, we were actually encouraging this negative response, or our own dialogue. We were supporting our own negative perception. So as Andrew said, like if you can have a more trusting perception, if you can believe people are good, you'll actually find that your interactions and the data, the results will come to support your mindset. So let's see, false assumptions. So a lot of false assumptions we used to make is the majority of people are bad, when we know at least 1% or less will commit a violent crime, that bad people aren't smart, and that they lie to get what they want. That's not true. And the perfect home. Who determines perfect? Us? That's very arrogant. So finally, what glasses do you have on? I have just a quick little story that I was sick a few years ago, and it was, just a normal sickness. And I was watching Merlin, and I was like binge watching Merlin. Yes, I'm kind of a dork. And I watched like over a day's worth of Merlin, and I had to go to the grocery store. And as I was going down the aisle, something scared me, and my mind immediately went to, oh my God, a dragon. Okay. So I know dragons aren't real. Like I don't need anyone to tell me dragons aren't real, but my mind immediately went there. So the more negative, the more we feed ourselves with the negative things that are happening, or we tell ourselves these negative stories, we are actually creating this way of viewing the world. So we ask, like, what glasses do you have on? Are they the positive glasses? People are good glasses, or are they really the questioning the community? All right, and then I said finally, but this is really the finally one. So we want to say we're coming from a place of equality, that if someone's angry, that you're going to try to identify, where is that anger coming from? Is it fear or sadness? Retrain your brain to be positive. Challenge yourself to think about positive intentions. When that car in front of you keeps braking, immediately, instead of thinking that jerk, think, oh, that person might have, I don't know, a reason for doing that. That we assume the best in people, that we have a safe person that we can be authentic to. So if you have a bad experience, you can go into an office, share that experience, be okay with it, and walk out. That you challenge fictional stories. So if people come in and tell you this horrible story about an animal was abused and all of this, is that you ask questions, not in a demeaning way, not in a challenging way, but figure out, did they make that story up? And I swear to you, the majority of the time, these people, and even on my team, it's so natural. They make up some story when really, the cat came in with a broken leg. We don't know how it happened. And somehow by the end of it, people have come up with the reasons that this cat's leg was broken. Challenge the stories and get the best out of helping people by making them feel safe. And then by doing that, you will increase your influence. All right, I think that was it for me.
Thank you so much, Mandy. That was great. I took so many notes for both of your presentations. But the one thing I really loved about your presentation, Mandy, that I haven't thought of just in like, life context, not necessarily animal welfare, is the idea of anger being the most socially acceptable reaction or emotion, because fear and sadness are seen as weakness. And I think I almost always divert to sadness because I'm not a very big person. I'm not a very intimidating person. And it's usually easier for me to be like, well, why are you doing this to me? Instead of being like, why are you doing this to me? Because if I do that, people laugh at me. But, I'm in the minority there. So that's really interesting. And I see people all the time. I'm like, why are they so upset that their food's taking so long, or that they haven't been, greeted at the animal shelter yet, or whatever it may be? But it is it's okay to be angry, right? But if we're sad, if we're crying, if we're scared, it's not as acceptable. That's so interesting, and that's just a huge tangent, but thank you so much for sharing that. um, we would love to hear your questions in the chat. We've got one already that I think is really interesting, from Anna. And Anna, before I ask your question, I'm going to point something else out, from Andrew's presentation. So Andrew, one thing I noticed from your presentation was in your mission statement that you shared, you a lot of times in mission statements or in like statements about adoption, we have these blanket statements about how we don't discriminate based on all these factors. And the thing I really liked about your mission statement is that instead of saying we don't discriminate, you said we welcome, and then listed all the different groups of people, especially folks who have been excluded from a lot of animal welfare's programs and services. So I thought that was really great that you took it in a positive spin. So Anna had a question about your other materials, and that was for your fee structure. You had it labeled as, I think, standard, low income, and then what was the $200 one? What was that one?
We call it complete care.
Complete care. Okay, perfect. So Anna was wondering, do folks self-select the low income adoption fees, thinking that labeling it as low income might ruffle some feathers, or like Mandy brought up the idea of shame earlier, if that would make people feel like ashamed of their financial status. And in Anna's community, some of her towns have poverty levels as high as 24%. And I know there's definitely communities in Oakland that have high levels of poverty too.
Absolutely.
So yeah, could you talk a little bit about that language?
Yeah, no, great question. And you're absolutely right. And this was our first effort, and we are on a journey of continuous improvement too. So fully intend to change that language at our next time we update our adoption agreement, because we struggled with what phrasing to use there that wouldn't come across as judgy, and I think we did miss the mark. So yeah, I think we're going to change that. If anybody has a suggestion on better phraseology, please put it in the chat, because it's one of the things we plan to change in the next time we update our adoption agreement. But people do self-select it. Our data right now, it's about 5% of our adopters choose that option.
I wonder if you could just call it, I live in the Bay Area and my rent is $24,000 for a studio. Let me have a free cat, or something like that, right?
Yeah. But I really appreciate that feedback.
For groceries.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, and that could be a lot better.
Yeah. And have you ever had anyone like say anything to you about it? Any of your adopters?
No, we haven't. Yeah, again, we don't really discuss it or kind of try to push someone in any particular direction. We literally just hand the form over to them when they fill out their adoption agreement, and we just say, on the back it explains about our adoption fee. Please choose what's most appropriate for you, and then we just go with whatever they select. So yeah, so we haven't had any particular negative feedback from about it, but even so, I think you're right that there's room to make it better.
And I wonder too, maybe CARE would have some suggestions in the same way they had the suggestions for the really great mission statements, that they might have some suggestions for those terms. So thanks, Anna. That is a really, really good point. The next thing we have, also from Anna, is sharing, the glasses, right? Like what kind of glasses are you wearing today? Is a book called Factfulness. challenging our basic instincts, fear, generalization, negativity, with more fact-based worldview, just to ask ourselves critical thinking questions. Applies for all aspects of life. So, and definitely animal welfare and working, I think, directly with the public. So thanks for sharing that too, Anna. I always think Malcolm Gladwell books are really, really good for that too, just like turning your mind on like how you see something and you think X when really Y is what's actually going on. So I would recommend those too. Ooh, this one's from my old friend and current friend, but old coworker, Emily Wood. Hi, Emily. And this is a great question. And Emily and I have never worked with people like this ever in our entire careers. But how do you get buy-in in the hearts and minds of people who really do live and relish those gotcha moments? People who are, their glasses are, they're looking for the bad stuff before the person even opens their mouth. And Emily, you're getting some love for this question. It looks like now the chat's blowing up. But Mandy, why don't I turn that one over to you first, because you mentioned the gotcha moments. How do you train that out of people, get people to start thinking the other ways?
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting because when we first started doing this, like that was a big deal, right? But whenever you're changing this culture and the way that you're thinking, you are going to have to bring certain people along on the journey that are going to be more reluctant. And what I say, as far as your like the beginning of your cultural shift, more towards the positive, away from the negative, is you have to find the people who are on your team that really believe in it, that believe in what you're saying and what you're doing. And you start to build from that core group. And if you go after the people, the non-believers first, you are going to have an uphill battle. But really what ends up happening is that it becomes such a solidified part of your culture that people talking about those gotcha moments, or they're really proud of themselves, nobody will have it. Like there's no one to share it with, and they end up feeling out of place in your organization. So much so that now when we hire primarily from the cultural standpoint first and foremost. So even if we have the absolute best person with skills and talent, but they do not believe that our community is equal to us, or that even we have a very collaborative environment, any of the things that we really care about, we won't hire them. Our culture is only as good as the people we have working with us. And I do think challenging. So I have some exercises, Emily, if you want to reach out, I can put my email in the chat that you can do with your team, where you have them, you create a situation and you have them break out into groups, and they give the reason the situation happened. So why was that dog tied to the front door of the shelter? And in the past, it would have been like, that jerk, blah, 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 blah. And you challenge people to say, you cannot tell me a negative reason why that happened. It can only be positive reasons. And we've always found that we had the best responses. Like, we're right near the Canadian border. It was a truck driver and he picked up the dog, but he had his load and he had to get to Canada. So he stopped and tied it to the door because he knew the shelter was the best place for the animal. And they're just, and you can actually use situations that are happening in your shelter right now that you're like, wait a minute, let's change our thought process on this. And then have everybody write down the reason and then share them.
I love that, Mandy. I'm going to do that when I get mad at people driving too. You say, why are they braking so much? Why are they switching lanes so much?
Honestly, I will tell you that this mindset came from when I had my paralyzed pug, Molly, because I would take her to the park in her little wheelchair, and people would tell me that I was a bad person and that I should euthanize her. Wow. And I just started to realize that when the kid is on the swing set, like screaming at his mom, and I'm sitting there going, oh my God, Mom, you are a horrible parent. Like, I shouldn't be doing that. And I should be saying, that child could be autistic. There could be a number of reasons, and the mom is doing the best job she can. So it really is, and I'm not perfect at this. I'm not perfect at all, but it's just saying, whenever you have that thought, that you pause and you try to think of the positive reason that could be happening.
Perfect. Yeah. And Mandy, if you don't mind putting the exercises in the Maddie's Pet Forum, that would be super. The other thing that I also heard you say that I really liked was that if you start with the negative people, it's going to be the uphill battle. And to get the folks on board who are, not relishing those gotcha moments. We had another huddle where we talked about finding the unofficial leaders of each group, right? Like someone who might not have a leadership position, but for whatever reason, their team looks to them, and helping those people become your influencers too. Andrew, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, as a kind of limited admissions shelter, our situation is a little bit different. We don't really accept owner surrenders. We don't accept stray animals directly from the public, but we still run into that situation when we're telling stories, about the animals that we help, where it's really easy to fall into that trap of saying like, you know, telling a history of an animal that's maybe not particularly positive, and how we were able to intervene and help that animal. Like, it's important to be able to tell those stories. That's part of like getting the community to understand what we're doing. But at the same time, like we try to be very conscientious about the language we use, not blaming, not judging, as much as possible. And it's something that you have to constantly police yourself for, I think, because we've probably everybody in this industry has had that reaction where something, a situation arises with an animal or something happens and your gut reaction is can be pretty negative. So it's definitely something that we're always working on, and making sure that we're using positive language and avoiding judgment, mostly as in our storytelling around the animals that we're helping.
And speaking of positive language, you've got a ton of great suggestions in the chat for new terms for your fees.
Yes, we crowdsourced it. Thank you all.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're here for, right? And then Steve is wondering if you'd be willing to share that document, and I'm sure other folks are too. So if you don't mind, Andrew, putting that in the pet forum too, that would be great.
No problem.
And actually, too, while we'll just continue on this thread here, Carrie asks a great question about the sliding scale adoptions. And she said, what are highlights for training staff when they offer that scale? I can imagine our staff giving the whale eye to someone who chooses the lower adoption fee. And I think we've all had that too, where someone walks in and they say, hey, do you have any free cats? Or do you have discounts for seniors or discounts for military people or whatever it may be? And you get that, where you're like, no, you're going to pay full price because all of our animals are worth it, right? Even though you live in the Bay Area and you paid $300 for groceries. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Maybe because we're small, it hasn't been that big of a problem for us. We've been able to bring everybody along on our team to embrace that approach. We do training for anyone who's doing adoption counseling. They go through our training, I guess you could call it indoctrination on our philosophy around adoptions. And so yeah, it just I guess it's so integral to our whole philosophy and approach to adoptions around being open and non-judgmental and matchmaking and everything, that the adoption fee is sort of an afterthought, and and it's it's just not an integral part of the conversation. And so, and like I said, the way we train our staff to deal with that adoption fee is just to let the adopter choose and then just charge the amount that they selected. So I with that approach, I haven't experienced that with a whale eye phenomenon, but yeah, maybe we're fortunate with our small team that's not been such a challenge for us.
And Mandy, do you ever see that when folks are like you said, you don't always have to charge I'm so sorry, the reclaim fee, or if someone can't afford the medical bills? Do you have folks getting defensive about that too?
So I would say that we used to, and I actually put this in the chat, is that I'd be really interested in seeing why would a staff person, what's the emotion that would cause them to be offended by somebody asking? Because I think that the coming up with your foundation of why we do this work. We do not do this work to evaluate whether or not someone has money. We do not do this work to say, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to spay or neuter your cat because you can't afford it. We do this work to help maintain the health and welfare of animals so that they can live their best life with their families. So if that means that we do all our adoptions for free, then we do all our adoptions for free. Like, it's that gotcha thing that people in your front desk, like, I would evaluate, do you have gotcha people in your front desk positions that are really trying to ensure that, you know, you're the good person and you're the right person? And it is changing that priority to say, it doesn't matter. Like, what matters is that this cat, this dog is leaving and they're going to be in a home. And that's what we want.
I love it. And we're almost out of time. So both Mandy and Andrew, thank you so much. I want to know when both of you are going to write your books so we can read those. And Mandy, about the science of everything in the background, and Andrew, about how you can create this cat cafe. And you actually got questions about this too. So hopefully we can see you on the forum for that, and how you managed to thrive in the Bay Area, because I would like to read that book too. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We're really excited to have you back next Tuesday, where we're going to be talking about creating partnerships with other animal welfare organizations, with Pasco County and Runaways Rescue. So look forward to seeing Spencer and Danny on the call. And that is going to, as always, be next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time and 1 p.m. Central time. Thank you again, Andrew and Mandy. Thank you, Wendy and Allison, for your help today. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us. Please continue to stay safe, take good care of yourself. Oh, I'm sorry, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Sorry about that, everyone. So you can know time, but please, and so you can continue to do this great work that you do to take care of yourself and all the animals in your community. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.